The fluorescent lights in courtroom 4B buzzed like angry wasps. I'd been staring at them for 20 minutes, trying to keep my composure while my wife's lawyer made a show of looking at my clothes. Your Honor, I'd like to enter into evidence Exhibit 14, Mr. Dalton's last 3 pay stubs from his employment at, let me see here. He flipped through his papers with exaggerated slowness. Ah, yes, Henderson's Auto Repair, $2,147 per month before taxes. He let that number hang in the air like a bad smell. My client, Jessica Dalton, currently earns $14,500 per month as a senior marketing director at Prestige Communications. Their daughter, Emma, attends Riverside Academy. Annual tuition $38,000. Mr. Dalton's annual income wouldn't even cover half of that. I sat at the defendant's table in my blue Walmart button-down, 12 by 97 on clearance, and said nothing. My lawyer, a young public defender named Miguel Santos, who'd been assigned to me 3 weeks ago, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Your Honor, Jessica's lawyer continued, we're not asking for anything unreasonable. Primary custody to my client, supervised visitation for Mr. Dalton twice a month, and child support calculated at the standard percentage of his income. He paused for effect, which, given his financial situation, would be approximately $427 per month. Someone in the gallery snickered. I didn't turn to look. I knew it was Jessica's mother, Diane, a woman who'd spent the last 9 years reminding me that her daughter had married down. Mr. Dalton, I looked up. Judge Patricia Whitmore was studying me over her reading glasses. Mid-50s, silver hair pulled back in a tight bun, the kind of face that had seen every trick in the book and wasn't impressed by any of them. Yes, Your Honor? You've been very quiet during these proceedings. Do you have anything to say in response to opposing counsel's characterization of your financial situation? I glanced at Miguel. He gave me a small nod. We'd discussed this. No, Your Honor, not at this time. Jessica's lawyer laughed. Actually laughed, right there in open court. Your Honor, I think Mr. Dalton's silence speaks volumes. He knows he can't provide for his daughter. He knows, Mr. Hartwell. Judge Whitmore's voice cut like a blade. I didn't ask for your commentary. I asked Mr. Dalton a question and he answered it. Hartwell, Gregory Hartwell, partner at Morrison & Hartwell, $650 an hour, had the grace to look slightly chastised. Apologies, Your Honor. Judge Whitmore shuffled some papers. Before we proceed with final arguments, I need to confirm some details for the record. She looked at me again. Mr. Dalton, please state your full legal name. I took a breath. This was the moment. Vincent Thomas Dalton. The name echoed in the quiet courtroom. Judge Whitmore's pen stopped moving. She looked up at me slowly, and I watched the color drain from her face like water from a sink. I'm sorry, she said, her voice suddenly careful. Could you repeat that? Vincent Thomas Dalton, Your Honor. She stared at me for a long moment. Then she turned to her clerk, a young woman with red hair and nervous hands, and whispered something I couldn't hear. The clerk's eyes went wide. She stood up so fast her chair scraped against the floor, and then she was rushing toward the door behind the judge's bench, heels clicking frantically. Gregory Hartwell frowned. Your Honor, is there a problem? Judge Whitmore didn't answer. She was still looking at me, but her expression had transformed completely. The cool authority was gone. In its place was something I hadn't seen directed at me in a very long time. Fear. Jessica leaned over to her lawyer, whispering urgently. I caught fragments. What's happening? And why did she react like that? The side door opened. 2 men entered the courtroom. They wore dark suits and moved with the practiced efficiency of people who did this every day. Federal marshals. I recognized the badges on their belts. They walked directly to the plaintiff's table, to Jessica. Jessica Marie Dalton, the first marshal said. My wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, looked up at them with confusion. Yes? What is this? I'm in the middle of a custody hearing. The marshal pulled out a document. Mrs. Dalton, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, theft of government funds, and obstruction of justice." The courtroom erupted. Jessica screamed, actually screamed, this primal sound of shock and denial that bounced off the wood-paneled walls. "What? No! This is insane! I haven't done anything!" Gregory Hartwell was on his feet. "This is outrageous. Your Honor, my client is in the middle of legal proceedings. Whatever this is, it can wait." "It cannot wait, Counselor." The second marshal was already moving behind Jessica, handcuffs catching the fluorescent light. "This warrant was signed by a federal judge 2 hours ago. Your client has the right to remain silent. Anything she says can and will be used against her in a court of law." "Vincent." Jessica's eyes found mine across the chaos. Mascara was already running down her cheeks, her carefully applied makeup dissolving under the weight of her panic. "Vincent, what did you do? What did you do?" I didn't answer. I just sat there in my $12.97 Walmart shirt and watched the woman who'd spent the last 18 months telling me I was worthless get dragged out of a courtroom in handcuffs. My name is Vincent Dalton. Most people call me Vince. 3 years ago, I was a senior investigator for the Department of Treasury's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, FinCEN. I had a security clearance, a 6-figure salary, and access to information that could topple corporations and imprison executives. Then I gave it all up, walked away from everything, became a mechanic at a small auto shop in suburban Virginia. Not because I had to, because I was hunting something, someone. And today, after 1,127 days of playing the fool, of letting my wife and her family believe I was nothing, of enduring every insult and humiliation they could throw at me, today the trap finally closed. Let me take you back to where this really started. September 2021. I was at the top of my career. 15 years with FinCEN, promoted to senior investigator in the Complex Financial Crimes Division. My job was tracking money, following the threads of fraud, embezzlement, and corruption through shell companies and offshore accounts. I was good at it, better than good. I'd helped build cases that put 3 hedge fund managers, a state senator, and the CFO of a Fortune 500 company behind bars. Jessica and I had been married for 6 years at that point. We'd met at a charity event in D.C. She was working in PR for a nonprofit. I was there representing Treasury at some interagency function. She was beautiful, confident, the kind of woman who made every room feel smaller just by walking into it. Emma came along 2 years after the wedding. The day she was born, I held her in my arms and cried. This perfect little human, half me and half the woman I loved. I swore I would protect her forever. For 4 years, I thought we were happy. I was wrong. The first sign should have been the job change. Jessica left her nonprofit position for Prestige Communications, a boutique marketing firm that paid almost triple her previous salary. The CEO, a man named Richard Crane, had recruited her personally. "It's an incredible opportunity," she told me over dinner. "Richard thinks I have executive potential. He wants to mentor me." I was happy for her, proud even, my wife, the rising star. I didn't notice the late nights at first. My own hours were unpredictable. Financial crimes don't follow a 9-to-5 schedule. When Jessica started coming home at 10, 11, sometimes midnight, I assumed she was just working hard. I didn't notice the new clothes, either. Not really. She'd always liked nice things, and now she could afford them. The designer handbags, the expensive shoes, I figured she was treating herself. What I did notice was the distance. We stopped talking about our days, stopped eating dinner together, stopped everything that had made us feel like partners. Emma became the only thread connecting us. We'd orbit around her like 2 planets that had forgotten they were supposed to share the same sun. "You're imagining things," Jessica said when I tried to bring it up. "I'm just stressed. Work is demanding. We barely see each other anymore." "Then maybe you should work fewer hours instead of blaming me for working more." The fights started after that. Small ones at first, then bigger. Every conversation became a battlefield. Every question I asked was controlling. Every concern I raised was paranoid. In October 2021, I came home early from a conference in New York. My flight had been canceled due to weather, and I'd managed to get on an earlier one instead. I found Jessica in our bedroom with Richard Crane. The cliché of it almost made me laugh. The husband coming home unexpectedly, the wife scrambling for clothes. The other man, smooth, silver-haired, reeking of expensive cologne, trying to maintain his dignity while buttoning his shirt. Vince, it's not what you think. It's exactly what I think, Jessica. Richard Crane stepped forward, hands raised like he was calming a wild animal. Vincent, let's all just take a breath here. These things happen. Adults can discuss this rationally. I looked at him, really looked. I'd been doing this job for 15 years. I knew how to read people, their micro-expressions, their tells, the tiny movements that revealed what they were really thinking. And in that moment, looking at Richard Crane, I saw something that went beyond simple adultery, arrogance, the absolute certainty that he was untouchable. "Get out of my house," I said quietly. "Now, Vincent, get out of my house before I throw you out." He left. Jessica followed him to the door, whispering something I couldn't hear. When she came back, her expression had changed. The guilt was still there, but underneath it was something harder, something calculated. "I want a divorce," she said. "Fine." She blinked. She'd expected me to fight, to beg, to give her leverage. "Fine, that's all you have to say?" "What do you want me to say, Jessica? You've been sleeping with your boss. Our marriage is over." She crossed her arms. "I want the house. I want primary custody of Emma. And I want you to understand that Richard has very good lawyers." "I'm sure he does." "You're not going to fight me on this?" I thought about Emma, about the life we'd built, about all the hours I'd spent away from home, chasing criminals, thinking I was making a difference. And I thought about Richard Crane's face, that absolute confidence. Something clicked in my investigator's brain. A pattern I'd seen before in dozens of cases. "No," I said slowly, "I'm not going to fight you. Not yet, anyway." That night, after Jessica went to stay at a friend's house, almost certainly Richard's penthouse, I sat in my home office and started digging. Prestige Communications had always struck me as odd. A small marketing firm that somehow landed contracts with major corporations and government agencies. A CEO who lived like a billionaire despite running a company with only 40 employees. A client list that included defense contractors, pharmaceutical companies, and 3 different federal agencies. It took me 2 hours to find the first irregularity. It took me 2 weeks to understand the scope of what I was looking at. Richard Crane wasn't just running a marketing firm, he was running a money laundering operation, and my wife was right in the middle of it. I should have reported it immediately. That's what protocol demanded. I was a federal investigator who discovered potential financial crimes. The correct procedure was to document everything, hand it over to my superiors, and let the system take its course. But there was a problem. Richard Crane had connections, serious connections. His client list included people with the power to make investigations disappear, to transfer inconvenient agents, to bury evidence, to ensure that certain names never appeared in certain reports. I'd seen it happen before. Good cases, solid evidence, witnesses who were ready to testify, all of it evaporating because someone made a phone call to someone else who owed them a favor. If I reported through normal channels, there was a very real chance that Richard would find out. And if Richard found out, the evidence would vanish. Worse, my daughter was living in a house with a man running a criminal enterprise. If I moved too fast, if I spooked him, Emma could be caught in the crossfire. So I made a decision that would cost me everything, and eventually give me everything back. I went to the one person I trusted absolutely. Harold Chen, my mentor at FinCEN. 63 years old, 3 years from retirement, and the most incorruptible man I'd ever known. We met at a diner in Arlington, the kind of place where nobody looked twice at two men in suits having a quiet conversation. "You're sure about this?" Harold asked, after I'd laid everything out. "I've traced $47 million through Prestige Communications in the last 18 months alone. Shell companies in Delaware, offshore accounts in the Caymans, fake consulting fees to entities that don't exist, and that's just what I could find with limited access." "And your wife?" I stirred my coffee. "She's been signing off on invoices, authorizing payments. Whether she knows what she's really doing..." I shook my head. "I don't know. Maybe she does. Maybe she's convinced herself it's just creative accounting. Or maybe she knows exactly what she's doing and doesn't care." I didn't answer. I didn't want to think about that possibility. Harold was quiet for a long moment. Then he said the thing I'd been afraid he'd say. "You need to step back, Vince. You're too close to this. Conflict of interest doesn't even begin to describe." "I know. If anyone finds out you've been investigating your own wife's employer..." "I know, Harold. You could lose your job, your clearance, everything." "I know." I looked up at him. "That's why I'm asking for your help. Not as my supervisor, as my friend." Harold studied me for a long time. I could see him weighing the options, calculating the risks. Finally, he nodded. "What do you need?" "I need to disappear from FinCEN, quietly, a reason that doesn't raise red flags." "You want to go undercover?" "Sort of, but not officially. I want to step down, resign, make it look like the divorce destroyed me, like I couldn't handle the stress. Vince, if I'm still an investigator, Richard's people will be watching me. They monitor federal employees. I've seen the files. But if I'm just another burned-out government worker whose wife left him for a rich guy, nobody pays attention to the losers. And while you're playing the loser, I keep digging, quietly, off the books, building a case that's so airtight, so comprehensive, that by the time I bring it forward, there's no way anyone can make it disappear." Harold shook his head slowly. "You're talking about years, Vince. Years of pretending to be something you're not. Years of watching your wife and daughter live with the man you're trying to destroy. I know what I'm talking about. And if Jessica gets full custody, if you lose access to Emma entirely..." My jaw tightened. "Then I lose access. Temporarily. But when this is over, when Richard Crane is in prison and Jessica is facing charges, I'll get her back. For good." "You're gambling everything on this." "No," I said. "I'm gambling everything on the truth. The truth always comes out, Harold. You taught me that. Sometimes it just needs a little help." 2 weeks later, I submitted my resignation from FinCEN, citing personal reasons related to my ongoing divorce. 3 months after that, I was working at Henderson's Auto Repair, making $17 an hour, living in a one-bedroom apartment that smelled like mildew. The investigation had begun. I spent the next 2.5 years building my case in the shadows. Days, I fixed cars, brake pads and oil changes and transmission repairs. My coworkers thought I was just another middle-aged guy who'd hit rock bottom after his marriage fell apart. They'd clap me on the shoulder after work, buy me beers, tell me it would get better. Nights, I became someone else entirely. I'd set up a secure workspace in my apartment. Encrypted drives, VPN connections, burner phones. Everything compartmentalized, nothing traceable. Harold fed me information when he could, but mostly I worked alone, following the money thread by thread. Richard Crane's operation was bigger than I'd initially realized. Prestige Communications was just the tip of the iceberg. Underneath it was a network of shell companies spanning 12 countries, moving money for clients who couldn't afford to have their names attached to certain transactions. Drug cartels in Mexico, arms dealers in Eastern Europe, corrupt politicians across 3 continents, and at the center of it all, pulling the strings, was Richard Crane, a man who'd convinced the world he was just a successful marketing executive with a taste for expensive wine. Jessica's role became clearer as I dug deeper. She wasn't just an unwitting participant. She was actively managing the money flows, creating fake invoices, coordinating with offshore banks. Whether she'd started as an innocent dupe or had known from the beginning, I couldn't say. But by the time I had enough evidence, she was in too deep to claim ignorance. The hardest part wasn't the investigation. The hardest part was Emma. The custody agreement gave me weekends, 2 days every other week. Jessica fought even that, arguing that my unstable lifestyle made me an unsuitable influence. "He works at a car repair shop," I heard her tell the mediator. "He lives in a studio apartment. What kind of example is that for our daughter?" I didn't fight back. I couldn't afford to look like I had resources, like I had anything worth protecting. So I took what I could get and made every minute count. Emma was confused at first. She didn't understand why Daddy had left his important job, why he lived in a small apartment now, why he couldn't buy her the things Mom and Richard could. "Are you poor now, Daddy?" she asked me once during one of our weekends. "I have everything I need," I told her. "I have you. Richard says you gave up. He says you couldn't handle the pressure." It took everything I had not to react. "People say a lot of things, sweetheart. What matters is what's true." "What is true?" I pulled her into a hug. "That I love you more than anything in the world, and that one day you'll understand why Daddy made the choices he made." She didn't understand, not then, but she would. By early 2024, I had everything I needed. 12 shell companies documented. $127 million in traceable illegal transactions. Bank records, emails, recorded conversations. A web of evidence so comprehensive that even Richard Crane's expensive lawyers wouldn't be able to spin their way out of it. But I had one problem. Timing. If I brought this to the authorities now, Jessica would be arrested immediately, which meant Emma would be placed in temporary custody, either with Jessica's parents, who despised me, or with foster care. I couldn't let that happen. I needed to control the moment of impact. Then Jessica handed me the perfect opportunity. The divorce had been finalized a year earlier, but she'd never stopped trying to squeeze me. Child support modifications, custody adjustments, endless legal harassment designed to remind me of my place. In February 2024, she filed a motion to reduce my visitation rights to once a month, supervised only, citing my failure to maintain appropriate living standards. Her real reason? Richard was getting impatient. He wanted to adopt Emma, and my presence was an inconvenience. "We need to respond to this," Miguel Santos told me when the motion landed. He was fresh out of law school, assigned to my case because I qualified for legal aid. Good kid, earnest, completely out of his depth. "Don't respond," I said. "What?" "Vince, if we don't respond, she wins by default. You could lose your daughter entirely. Let her think she's winning. Let her file for a full custody hearing." "Why would you want that?" I looked at him. "Because I need her in a courtroom on a specific date, in front of a specific judge." Miguel stared at me. "What aren't you telling me?" "A lot, but I need you to trust me." "Trust you?" "Vince, I'm your lawyer. You're supposed to tell me everything." "Not this time." I put a hand on his shoulder. "When this is over, I'll explain. But right now, I need you to do exactly what I say. Let her have her hearing. Let her think she's won. And when we walk into that courtroom, don't say a word unless I tell you to. This is insane." "Probably. Will you do it?" Miguel looked at me for a long moment. Whatever he saw in my face must have convinced him, because he finally nodded. "Fine. But if this blows up in your face, I'm going to say, 'I told you so.'" "Fair enough." The hearing was scheduled for June 17th. I had 4 months to put the final pieces in place. The first piece was Harold Chen. He'd retired from FinCEN 6 months earlier, but his contacts remained intact. More importantly, he had relationships with people at the FBI and DOJ who could be trusted, people who wouldn't tip off Richard Crane. "It's ready?" Harold asked when I met him at our usual diner. I slid a hard drive across the table. Everything. 3 years of investigation. Every transaction, every shell company, every name. Harold picked up the drive, turning it over in his hands. You know, once I hand this over, there's no taking it back. They'll move fast. I know. Jessica could do serious time, years. I know that too. And you're okay with that? She's Emma's mother. I thought about my daughter, about the life she'd been living, surrounded by luxury, bought with blood money, raised by a woman who'd chosen wealth over integrity. Emma deserves to know the truth, I said. About her mother, about Richard, about all of it. She deserves the chance to grow up without lies. Harold nodded slowly. When do you want them to move? June 17th. There's a custody hearing scheduled. I want Jessica served in the courtroom. That's theatrical. That's justice. Harold smiled, a rare expression for him. You always did have a flair for the dramatic. The second piece was Judge Patricia Whitmore. I'd researched every family court judge in the district. Most of them were compromised in one way or another. Campaign contributions from law firms, social connections to wealthy donors. But Whitmore was different. Her brother had been killed by a drunk driver 20 years ago. The driver was a hedge fund manager who'd hired expensive lawyers and walked away with probation. Whitmore had dedicated her career to ensuring that money couldn't buy justice in her courtroom. More importantly, she'd been a federal prosecutor before becoming a judge. She still had contacts at DOJ. She would recognize the significance of my name the moment I said it. The third piece was the timing. The FBI agreed to execute the arrest warrant at exactly 10:45 a.m. on June 17th, 15 minutes into the hearing. Long enough for Jessica and her lawyer to establish their arrogance on the record, short enough that they wouldn't have time to sense the trap closing. Everything was in place. All I had to do was walk into that courtroom in my Walmart shirt and let them underestimate me one last time. On the morning of June 17th, I woke up at 5 a.m. Couldn't sleep anyway. I showered, shaved, and put on the cheapest clothes I owned. The blue button-down from Walmart, khaki pants I'd bought at Goodwill, scuffed shoes that had seen better days. I looked at myself in the mirror. For 3 years, I'd played this role, the broken man, the failure, the ex-husband who couldn't compete with his wife's billionaire boyfriend. Today, the performance would end. My phone buzzed, a text from Harold. Assets in position. Green light confirmed. Good luck. I took a deep breath and walked out the door. It was time to take my daughter back. The chaos in courtroom 4B lasted approximately 7 minutes. Jessica screamed the entire time they cuffed her. Screamed at me, screamed at the marshal, screamed at Gregory Hartwell to do something. Hartwell tried, objecting, demanding explanations, threatening lawsuits, but federal warrants don't care about billable hours. When they finally dragged her out, the courtroom fell silent. Judge Whitmore removed her glasses and looked at me. Mr. Dalton, or should I say, former Special Investigator Dalton? Vince is fine, Your Honor. She studied me for a long moment. I reviewed the summary affidavit the FBI provided this morning. I have to say, in 23 years on the bench, I've never seen anything quite like this. I apologize for the disruption to your courtroom. Don't. A hint of something, admiration maybe, flickered across her face. Your ex-wife's attorney spent the last hour telling me you were an unfit father because you work at an auto repair shop. Meanwhile, you've been conducting a 3-year undercover investigation that just brought down one of the largest money laundering operations on the East Coast. Hartwell, still standing at the plaintiff's table, had gone pale. Your Honor, I had no knowledge of my clients. Save it, counselor. You're going to have bigger problems than this custody case once the FBI starts looking at Prestige Communications' legal representation. Hartwell sat down heavily. Judge Whitmore turned back to me. Given the circumstances, I'm suspending all custody arrangements pending a full review. However, Based on the evidence presented today and the obvious unsuitability of the mother's current living situation, I'm granting you temporary emergency custody of your daughter, effective immediately. I closed my eyes. 3 years. 1,127 days of playing the fool. And now, finally, Emma was coming home. Mr. Dalton. I opened my eyes. Yes, Your Honor? Get your daughter, and next time you're in my courtroom. She almost smiled. Wear whatever you want. The school was only 15 minutes away. I drove in silence, my hand steady on the wheel. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by something quieter. Not triumph. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like finally setting down a weight I'd been carrying for so long I'd forgotten what it was like to stand up straight. Riverside Academy was everything Jessica had wanted for Emma. Stone buildings, manicured lawns, students in pressed uniforms walking between classes, a $38,000 a year monument to the belief that money could buy your children a better future. I parked in the visitor lot, my 12-year-old Honda Civic looking distinctly out of place among the BMWs and Range Rovers, and walked to the administrative office. I'm here to pick up Emma Dalton, I told the receptionist. I have a court order for emergency custody. 20 minutes later, after phone calls to the court and verification of the paperwork, Emma appeared in the doorway of the waiting room. She looked confused, scared. She was wearing her school uniform, plaid skirt, white blouse, the Riverside Academy crest embroidered on her blazer. Dad, what's going on? They pulled me out of class. I stood up. Hey, sweetheart. Where's Mom? She's supposed to pick me up today. I walked over to her and knelt down so we were at eye level. She was 11 now, almost 12. Not a little girl anymore, but not yet a teenager. Old enough to sense that something was seriously wrong. Emma, I need to tell you something, and I need you to be brave. Her eyes widened. Is Mom okay? Is she hurt? She's not hurt, but she's in trouble, legal trouble. She did some things that were wrong, and now she has to answer for them. What kind of things? I took her hands in mine. Remember when you asked me why I stopped working at my old job? Why I started fixing cars instead? She nodded slowly. I stopped because I found out that some people close to us, were doing bad things. Hurting people, breaking the law. I paused. Your mom was helping them, Emma. I don't know if she understood how serious it was at first, but she was part of it. Emma's face crumpled. No, Mom wouldn't. She's not a criminal. She's my mom. I know, and she still loves you. That hasn't changed. Then why? Tears were streaming down her cheeks now. Why did you have to tell on her? Why couldn't you just leave it alone? I pulled her into a hug. She resisted at first, her body rigid with anger and confusion, but then she collapsed against me, sobbing. Because the truth matters, sweetheart, even when it hurts, even when it's easier to look away. I stroked her hair. Your mom made choices, bad choices, and those choices have consequences. But that doesn't mean you did anything wrong. It doesn't mean anyone stopped loving you. I want to see her. You will, I promise. But right now, you're coming home with me. She pulled back and looked at me. Her eyes were red, her face blotchy with tears. Your apartment is too small. Despite everything, I almost laughed. Yeah, it is. We'll figure something out. I don't want to leave my school. We'll talk about that too. I don't want any of this. I know, baby, neither do I. I stood up and took her hand. She didn't pull away. Dad? Yeah? Did you really work at a car repair shop this whole time just to catch Mom? I thought about all those nights in my cramped apartment, poring over financial records while my neighbors played music through the thin walls. All those days under car hoods, grease on my hands, pretending to be someone I wasn't. Not just to catch her, I said, to protect you, to make sure that when the truth came out, you'd have somewhere safe to land. Emma was quiet for a moment. That's kind of badass, she finally said. I laughed, a real laugh. The first one in longer than I could remember. Don't say badass. You just said it. I'm a grown-up. She squeezed my hand. Whatever, Dad. We walked out of Riverside Academy together, past the stone buildings and manicured lawns, past the BMWs and Range Rovers. My Honda Civic was waiting in the visitor lot, looking exactly as out of place as it had when I arrived. Emma looked at it, then at me. We're definitely getting a better car, right? Eventually. Promise? I opened the passenger door for her. I promise. She climbed in, and I walked around to the driver's side. As I started the engine, I glanced at the Riverside Academy sign in my rearview mirror. I thought about Jessica sitting in a federal holding facility waiting to be processed. I thought about Richard Crane, whose arrest had happened simultaneously at his downtown office. I thought about Gregory Hartwell, who was probably already on the phone with his own lawyer. And I thought about the past 3 years, every sacrifice, every humiliation, every moment of doubt. It had all led here, to this moment, to my daughter in the passenger seat, to the truth finally out in the open, to the beginning of something new. Dad? Yeah? Can we get McDonald's? I'm starving. I smiled. Yeah, sweetheart, we can get McDonald's. The trials took 18 months. Richard Crane went first. The evidence was overwhelming. $127 million in documented illegal transactions, testimony from cooperating witnesses, a paper trail that even his team of defense attorneys couldn't explain away. He was convicted on 34 counts of money laundering, wire fraud, and conspiracy. The judge sentenced him to 23 years in federal prison. I was in the gallery when the verdict came down. Richard looked at me as they led him away in handcuffs. There was no arrogance left in his face, just the hollow expression of a man who'd finally run out of moves. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Jessica's trial was harder to watch. The prosecutors offered her a deal: testify against Richard and plead guilty to reduced charges. She refused at first, convinced that Richard's lawyers would somehow get them both off, that his connections would save them. They didn't. When she finally accepted the plea deal, it was too late for the best terms. She was convicted of conspiracy to commit fraud, theft of government funds, and obstruction of justice. The judge gave her 7 years. Emma cried when I told her. Not the angry tears from that first day at Riverside Academy, but something quieter, sadder. The tears of a child who was finally understanding that her mother wasn't who she'd pretended to be. Can I visit her? Of course, as often as you want. Will she hate me for living with you? I pulled her close. Your mother loves you, Emma. Whatever mistakes she made, that was never a lie. And she knows this wasn't your fault. None of it was. It feels like it was. I know, but feelings aren't always true. She visited Jessica once a month. I drove her to the facility, waited in the parking lot, and drove her home. I never asked what they talked about. That was between them. Slowly, painfully, we rebuilt our lives. I left. Henderson's auto repair. Frank Henderson actually cried when I told him I was leaving. Best mechanic I ever had, he said, even if you were some kind of secret government agent the whole time. Just an investigator, I said, and I wasn't lying about loving the work. There's something honest about fixing things with your hands. You ever want to come back, the bay's always open. I shook his hand. I appreciate that, Frank. More than you know. I was offered my old position at FinCEN. Better, actually, a supervisory role with a significant raise. The agency was happy to have me back, especially after the Crane case made national headlines. I turned it down. 3 years of undercover work had changed me. I didn't want to spend my life in an office anymore, chasing paper trails and filing reports. I wanted something different. I used the back pay I'd accumulated during my resignation. It turned out Harold had quietly arranged for my salary to continue, funneled through a discretionary fund, to buy a small house in a quiet neighborhood, 3 bedrooms, a backyard, a garage where I could still tinker with cars on weekends. Nothing fancy, just enough. Emma transferred to a public school in the fall. She complained at first. Riverside Academy had been all she'd known, but within a month she'd made friends, joined the soccer team, and started talking about how real everything felt. Real? I asked her one evening over dinner. At Riverside, everyone was pretending all the time. Pretending to be rich, pretending to be happy, pretending to like each other. She shrugged. Here, people are just people. Is that better? Yeah, I think it is. I started consulting for law enforcement agencies, FBI, DOJ, occasionally Treasury, financial crimes investigation, training programs for new agents, expert testimony in major cases. The work was flexible, well paid, and let me be home every evening for dinner. Harold Chen came to visit once about a year after everything ended. We sat on my back porch, drinking beer and watching Emma kick a soccer ball around the yard. You did something remarkable, Harold said. 3 years. Most people would have cracked. Most people don't have a daughter to protect. That's not the only reason. You could have reported everything the moment you discovered it, taken the quick win, but you knew that wouldn't be enough. Richard had too many connections. The case would have disappeared. Maybe, or maybe you just wanted to make sure there was no escape. Harold smiled. You always were thorough. Too thorough, according to my ex-wife. How is Jessica? I watched Emma score an imaginary goal against an imaginary goalkeeper. Surviving. She started taking classes, accounting of all things. Says she wants to understand what she was actually doing all those years. Do you believe her? I believe she wants to be better. Whether she'll actually change, I shrugged. That's not up to me. And Emma, how's she handling all of it? She's resilient. Stronger than I expected. I paused. She asked me last week if I thought her mom was a bad person. What did you say? I said her mom was a person who made bad choices, that there's a difference, and that people can change if they really want to. Do you believe that? I thought about Jessica, about the woman I'd married, the woman I'd discovered in our bedroom with another man, the woman I'd watched get dragged out of a courtroom in handcuffs. I believe in second chances, I finally said. I believe that the worst thing you've done doesn't have to be the last thing you do. But I also believe that forgiveness has to be earned. And some things take a long time to earn back. Harold nodded slowly. That's a good answer. It's the only one I've got. Emma came running over, sweaty and grinning. Dad, did you see that goal? I saw it. Bend it like Beckham. Who's Beckham? I looked at Harold. I'm officially old. Join the club. Later that night, after Harold had gone and Emma was asleep, I sat alone in my living room. The house was quiet. The kind of quiet I used to dread in my studio apartment, but now felt peaceful. On the coffee table sat a framed photograph, the only one I'd kept from my old life. Emma, at 3 years old, laughing at something off camera, her whole face lit up with joy. That little girl had no idea what was coming, no idea that her parents' marriage would implode, that her mother would go to prison, that her father would spend 3 years pretending to be a failure just to protect her. But she'd survived. We both had. I thought about Gregory Hartwell laughing at my Walmart shirt. I thought about Judge Whitmore's face when she heard my name. I thought about Jessica screaming as they dragged her out of the courtroom. And I thought about the lesson all of it had taught me. People will underestimate you. They'll look at your clothes, your job, your bank account, and think they know your worth. They'll laugh at you, dismiss you, write you off as nothing. Let them. Because the truth doesn't care about appearances. The truth doesn't care about designer suits or expensive lawyers or how much money you have in the bank. The truth just waits, patient as stone, until the moment comes to reveal itself. And when that moment comes, everything changes. Sometimes Emma asks me if I regret it. 3 years of my life spent pretending to be broken. 3 years of oil changes and brake jobs and living in a studio apartment while my ex-wife hosted dinner parties at a billionaire's mansion. I tell her the same thing every time. I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Not for revenge. Revenge is hollow. It fills you up for a moment and leaves you emptier than before. I did it for the truth. I did it because some things are more important than comfort, more important than pride, more important than what other people think of you. I did it because my daughter deserved to grow up knowing that her father would never stop fighting for her, no matter what it cost, no matter how long it took. So here's my question for you. What would you sacrifice to protect the people you love? How far would you go to make sure the truth came out? I went to a courtroom in a $12 shirt and let them laugh at me. I spent 3 years as a nobody, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal everything. And if I had to do it all over again, I'd wear the same shirt. Tell me what you think in the comments. I read every single one. And if you know someone who's been underestimated, who's been written off, who's been told they're not enough, share this with them. Sometimes the people who look like they have nothing are the ones holding all the cards.